Okay, it is 9:30, and wasting no time wasted. It is an opportunity for us to catch up with someone who, the last time we caught up with him, he had just gotten his gig. And we'll see if he remembers this story. We're bringing Steven Wagoner, the chairman of the NPSL, hanging out with us here this morning. Morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you, sir?
Good morning. Fantastic. Thanks for having us.
Oh, always. Last time you were on with us, you had just assumed the mantle and the addition of the business card, the addition of the line on the business card for being chairman of this league. What has it been like since you have been chairman, to be a chairman of the NPSL? What's it been like for you?
I think it's good. It's funny. I always look at that the leadership roles probably a little bit uniquely, but to put it really simply, right? I'm here just to represent membership, right? And so one of those things that we've been doing, sometimes it sounds very straightforward and simple, but it's listening to membership, coming up with some good strategic plans, and executing on that. And I think we've done a good job with that.
You're in conference final time right now. How many places do you have to be at any given moment with all of the playoffs going on? How much is your head on the proverbial swivel, keeping an eye on who's advancing in the postseason?
Yeah, it's funny, but between the World Cup and and then you've got the NPSL playoffs. I think it's a great time for soccer and a lot of great games. Selfishly with Virginia Atlantic, I'll throw a little plug here with our group and Virginia Dream was a great matchup. 3-1 at half, ends up 3-3, goes into overtime 4-3. Unfortunately, what didn't work out for us, but they're a great side, and there's a lot of good games like that going on. And so I think that's what's great, whether it's for, the sporting component or for the fan, I think it's a great time for soccer.
What have you learned about the NPSL as a league, whether it's as an owner or a chairman or both? What have you learned about the league in this past year that kind of reinforces the path that the NPSL is on?
I think I think there's a few things, but one of which is obviously we've got a great group of owners who are passionate about the game, and then naturally when we're in some of these different rooms, whether it's with U.S. Soccer or other professional leagues, other amateur leagues, and so forth, there's a great respect for the league, and I think that's a great thing, and I think now what we look at and we say, hey, look, the league has to evolve. It's been around for quite a long time. And I think there's some small things that we can do a little bit differently. And naturally, I think we'll, continue to have a great path moving forward.
Now, this gets to kind of the bulk of the discussion here in our segment. And for those that may not know, yes, we believe in hydration breaks. Yeah, it's absolutely. So proper hydration for guesting is always important. For folks that may not know machinations when it comes to business IDs and things like that, I know a lot of us know what a 501c3 is.
Yep.
The NPSL is a 501c6. What in as English languagey a way as humanly possible, but if you have to go into economics, go for it. How would you explain how a 501c6 is different from a 501c3 and what we're used to seeing when it comes to corporate structures and entities?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to put it is there's different ways to structure charitable organizations, right? And so, I think what we're looking to do with the NPSL is say, hey, it's always, the intention has always been to be member driven. And I think when this is a little bit before me, and I've been in the NPSL for, almost 15 years, but it used to be a private organization. It converted for certain legal reasons into a nonprofit. And it's just always run that way. But I do believe that one of the unique things to it, is that, it's always been member run. And so whether it's as a nonprofit, and how we structured it and the difference between a 501c3 versus a 6, it's small stuff, right? It's just the way that it's structured to keep it really, really top level. It's still a non-for-profit, right? All the money stays in the organization and goes to, the members and everything. A lot of it's raised, to be fair, by the membership. It's a contribution from the members into the league to pay for league expenses. So I think now what we're looking to do is commercialize the league. and look at a different entity structure that, that we believe could, help, make us more and more successful as we move forward.
Earlier this week, it was announced by the league that you're looking into this idea, and you're obviously continuing the evaluation of organizational structure, creating greater value, expanding opportunities, commercialization, strategic partnerships, and innovation. And so you're now looking at this idea of the proposal under evaluation, transitioning the league to the member-owned structure. League members collectively owning the league, continuing to maintain complete ownership of their individual clubs, brands, intellectual property, local sponsorships, and community identities. Proposal also preserves flexibility to admit a strategic partner of up to 10% ownership, provided such a partnership delivers strategic value beyond capital alone to relationships, expertise, commercial opportunities, or the resources strengthening the league. That's from the release. How far back were the discussions to go down this route before the announcement was made 3 days ago?
Yeah, so I've been on the board for quite a while, and I think this has always been something that has been discussed, and for whatever reason, it was never actioned upon. And so when I took on this role in December, I said, hey, there's 3 objectives that we have for this year. One of which was to get representation with the U.S. Soccer Federation, so we ended up running for the U.S. Soccer Adult Council. And thankfully and graciously, we were voted in, right? And that's on behalf of the members of USASA, other affiliate national leagues and regional leagues, and so forth. And so obviously, we want to try to represent them in addition to what we're doing, and make sure that everybody, is growing within the adult game. So that was one of the pillars. The next one is, how do we restructure into something that attracts new owners, right? Also naturally encourages retention, right? It's almost like owning a house versus renting a house. If you own your house, you're naturally going to take care of it probably a little bit differently than if you're renting it. And that's probably the easiest way to put it. And then lastly, is how do we align and identify within PLS under professional league standards? And so I think there's a lot of strategy. And so those are really those 3 objectives that we have for this year. Right now, we've got a lot of support on the restructure, which is fantastic. And so, I think what we're trying to do is be transparent. We've done informational meetings with lawyers and, on the finance side, accountants, you name it. Then we've had, multiple months for members to ask questions. Then we've done live Q&A sessions. And I think that's a little bit different approach. In the past, it's been, hey, this is what we're doing. And, it's not even the NPSL. I think a lot of situations, you get, 50 or 100 people in a room. It's like, hey, how do you navigate this where people feel a part of it, can ask questions, but it's not also, something where things get sidetracked. And so I think my objective has been how do we have that right balance there? And I think we've done a good job with that. So what we're going to do is repeat what we've just done, on the first piece of presenting it to the league, which first took place in January. Then we took a month or 2 to just get all of our ducks in a row. Then this next phase that we did was about a month ago, and that was presenting it formally to the league, right, outside of me just presenting it. And then now we're moving into the presentation of the operating agreement and reviewing that, and that's never the fun stuff, but it's obviously needed, because I think what we want to do is set the league up not just for the next couple of years, but 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. Hey, like we've got the principles in place, so then that way, whoever's leading it, running the show in the future, or, whatever the league turns into, it's been set up the right way from the get-go. And that's our intention.
How many franchises are currently in the league or planning to be added to the league for 27 right now?
Yeah, so we've got about 70 in the mid 70s that are either active, inactive, or have already committed to the league for next year. And then, I think one of the challenges that we have, which is a good problem, right now, with our membership buy-in, people are paying the full membership fees. So, we're not charging, it's not $1,000. It's a $25,000 membership buy-in. And the reason why I say it is because the owners that are coming in, they're serious, right? Like Fuego just came in, and they were formerly USL 1, right? Like, and that's not to name drop the different leagues or this or that or whatever. It's more of, we're trying to attract, an owner that, yes, can put a good product on the field, but also recognizes, hey, this league, in order to be successful and for the teams to be successful, we need to be able to push the envelope forward, and the expectations of ownership need to continue to increase. So we're being very strategic on, our expansion moving forward. We've got some more teams in the pipeline, which is fantastic. And we think with some of the announcements and other projects that we're working on between now and the next, 6 months, that the NPSL is going to be positioned, very well moving forward.
Is there one question or concern in the first 6 months of 26, as you've had these two stages of presentation, that has come up more than any other topic when you're back and forth is there with ownership groups and franchises?
Yeah, I think my head goes in a couple different directions, and the reason is one of the beauties of the NPSL and the amateur game, and this is any league at the amateur level, is you have a lot of different perspectives and a lot of wide levels of ownership, as far as whether it's net worth, financial backing, and so forth. Some teams are literally trying to bootstrap their programs and spend the least as possible. And some are putting in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars over that, 2 or 3 months time. Like I could talk a little bit about our group. We did housing. We had 16 housing spots, 3 houses we rented over the summer to bring in top players. And I think that showed this year, right? Like our product is really good on the field, but also we're taking care of, our players. But I think the challenge is we want to come off, to answer your question directly. We want to make sure that it's very formal and that the legal piece is worded correctly and properly. But then it's how to, no different than you're asking, hey, the difference between a 501c3 and a 501c6. How do you then, dumb it down so then that way, not as it only everybody can understand it, but in addition, that it's not overcomplicated. And I think that's one of the things too. But there's been a lot of really good questions on it. A lot of it is just, making sure, I think people want to make sure that they're still going to have a voice, and, that the league is being positioned correctly.
Is there more of a concern from, and I'll just use this in a budgetary sense, is there a concern from those that are, to use your word, bootstrapping, to come into this conversation versus the ones that are spending the 6 figures? Is there a concern that those that are bootstrapping their way in may not have as much of a say at the table if things continue to progress their way down the line? And how much of a challenge is that for the NPSL to reassure those bootstrap franchises, no, everybody's got a seat at the table here?
Yeah, so it's actually a great question. One of the things that we made sure of is that, there's not going to be, people aren't going to be able to throw their weight around based on, hey, I've got more money than you, or this or that. It's going to be one vote per team. And naturally, right, if there's 100 teams, there's 100 votes. If there's 50 teams, there's 50 votes. Are there's other different ways to structure things? Sure. I think one of the things that we're looking at is equity through tenure. Now I don't want that to be confused with voting, right? Because that'll be different. So voting rights versus equity. But as you stay in the league 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, there will be some incentives that, you would basically have vested equity or additional units, awarded to you within that LLC model. Being an LLC declared as a partnership is the structure that we're looking at. And the reason for that is we want people to be around, right? If you're invested in the league for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you should be rewarded, right? And that's any business. And then naturally, I think there's just this natural evolution where, if you've got equity, and I'm not going to throw on valuations just because I think that would be, a little misleading for the conversation today. But let's just say that you had $1 today and all of a sudden you have $3. Right. Like all of a sudden people look at it and say, well, hey, like we've got something really, really cool here. Why would you leave? And so I think there's just a lot of different ways of looking at it, whether it's retention or it's just naturally value creation, right? Like by doing this, we've created millions of dollars in value for our owners overnight,
Yeah. And you're looking to continue to build upon that. And that was the interesting element as a part of this that I picked up in the release was, you were looking to the idea to be flexible enough to add the strategic partner of up to 10% ownership in this. And we're seeing equity funds in college football. We're seeing them dive into conferences and sit there and say, hey, if you want to improve, you can do this. And I mean specifically like the Big 12, where they're like, hey, if you want $30 million per franchise, you've got to do this, and this. Is there any concern on your end if you were to have a strategic partner? Is that why you're capping it at, say, a 10% interest level, so that way their interests don't supersede the interests of the league on the whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think the intention is to have it as a member-owned and member-run league, right? And so, we could deviate from that. What I mean by that is, the league could come back and say, hey, all the members voted and, we've got a partner at 50-50, right? Or it's whatever, right? But I think the intention here is like, hey, is there, a group or, I'll give you a wide variety, right? It could be private equity. It could be a soccer league, whether it's domestic or international, right? Like, we don't want to limit it, but I think being able to say, hey, listen, we recognize the game's a lot bigger than us. And that if we can get if we can have a partner that can add value beyond just, hey, if your financial valuation is X and you get 10% of that, that's, for me at least, I don't really look at that as the real reason to do something. The real reason is, hey, we've got someone who can come in and they're going to grow with us. And then naturally there's a win-win that we're creating more value for members. So that's the thought there. But again, it's that could change. Like, we'll have to see how that looks. Not going too deep here, but you ultimately could have a holding company, subsidiaries under it, and naturally you can have different equity structures under each subsidiary, right? Like, so there's just so many ways, and we've done a lot of financial modeling on this. There's a lot of ways to structure it, but I think what the reoccurring theme is, we want to make sure that our members are heard and that have an equal voice. And I'll kind of end with this on that, is that right now you do have some leagues that are member owned. A lot of them have a majority or almost a majority of a partnership, right? It might be a 51-49% or a 60-40, right? In some scenarios, you've got it's completely privately owned. Some scenarios, it's a franchisee model, right? So like, there's no right or wrong way to do it. But I think what we're doing, this will be one of the first leagues that comes out that I'm aware of at the amateur level, saying, hey, this league is fully owned by the members and it's an equal thing, right? So everybody's got a fair vote, fair opportunity at the table to voice their opinions.
Yeah, you mentioned the equity stakes for experience and being in a league for a long time. I was going to ask you how you were going to break a tie if it was an even number of franchises, and you kind of gave me that one. When it comes to the growth of the NPSL in general, what is the league missing? And I'll use that word in quotation marks, to get to that next step of where you and the hierarchy and the owners and the franchises, what are you missing to get to that next level of success that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of thoughts that come through my head. So I think one is the type of owner, right? Like, we want to continue to evolve, and we want the and by the way, we always hope that it's the owners that are in the league, right? Like, that's our intention. Mm-hmm. But I think naturally, right? Like, and this is public knowledge, right? Real estate backed deals make a lot of sense, right? If you can control your venue and you can have influence and monetize, that makes a lot of sense. We're looking at it from that standpoint. I think that's a massive differentiator at the amateur game. I think one of the things that we've looked at in the structure of this agreement with the owners is, at some point, that the conferences would be capped, right? So we're looking for 6 to 8 teams in a conference. And then it's, how many conferences would you have within the country? And so what ends up happening is, if you want to come into the NPSL and, that conference is full, unfortunately, there's not a spot at that national level for you, right? Today. That could change in the future. Again, there's always succession planning and different modeling that can go on. But I think our objective is like, hey, can we get into this place where we've got 6 to 8 teams in a conference within a certain number of conferences, right? And then all of a sudden, valuation starts to go up, especially you have some of these really unique partnerships. And I'm kind of throwing some teasers in there a little bit, because we've got some things in play that I'm hoping over the next 6 to 8 months, people are going to be like, wow, that's what they've been working on, you know? But then naturally you've got exclusivity, and that's what's going to drive valuations. That's what's going to drive interest, and continue to make the league relevant.
Well, you can always break news here if you want. It doesn't necessarily have to, I mean,
well, I tell you what, we'll definitely, I've always enjoyed our conversations. So, as some more things come out, we'd love to, come out and have additional conversation about it.
Oh yeah. We ain't going nowhere. So I mean, you just have to tell me, sit there and goes, yeah, knock on the door. Since where the key is under the mat now, you can pretty much get in any time. So you're looking for the review process to happen for this remaining 6 months of this year, 5 months of this year, and have it in place for the franchises that want to come in 27 that haven't announced they're coming in for 27. Is that the grand idea?
Correct. And actually, the timeline will be slightly quicker than that. We actually have a timeline that gets us through the August timeframe. And so right now we're putting all that together. We stopped a little bit over the last week or so for a couple different reasons. When I say stopped, we just pushed the timeline maybe a week or so.
You wanted to watch the World Cup on TV. I know.
Exactly. That's what it was. No, you know what it ends up coming down to is you put a timeline down, and then I want to make sure that members don't feel rushed. That's really what it comes down to. And if that's 80-90% of the room is feeling good, but you still got 10% that has questions, what's the point in shoving it down someone's throat of like, hey, no, this is this and we're moving forward. So my thought was, hey, let's push it back a week. Again, we've got the majority of the league, that more than the majority are very, very, it's about 90% of the league is for this today. And those are great numbers, right? So, I think now it's, hey, we'll move into that second phase. There's a couple strategic partnerships that we're working on. And so we have some of that in parallel too. Like, how do we position this based on what we're doing to make sure that all of these, nicely funnel in together. But so what people naturally see is over probably the next, 30 to 60 days, hopefully we've got an announcement coming out saying, hey, that, we're, moving forward with this, and this is where it's going. That could change, to be fair. It could be that, hey, all of a sudden it's not 80-90% or 85-90%, and it turns into something different. I don't want to say that just because I don't want to ever look like we're shoving something already, before it's happened. But right now it's looking really, really good. I think that the teams are excited. The league's excited. The board is unanimous. The staff is 100% behind it. I mean, that's one of the things too. Hey, does the staff believe in the vision? And they're 100% excited about it. So I think, everything's lined up right now, looking fairly well. And the plan will be over the next 30, 60 days to keep this moving forward, and then we'll have an update.
And we look forward to getting that update either mid-August, mid-September, or mid-whenever. As always, it is great to catch up with you, Steven, and find out what's going on with the NPSL, because it is a moving, growing organism. And for those of us that had issues in science class, that's why we talk to folks like you who are the science teachers when it comes to the growth of the NPSL. Thanks for dropping by this morning on a Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the World Cup, all the things, and we'll catch up with you soon, my friend. Thanks for dropping by.